Welcome to LSC. It's Sports Time. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today I have a special guest, Bill D., former football coach out at Phoebus High School from 1985 to 2008. Welcome, Bill.
Good to see you, Bob.
First thing I want to do is I want to find a little bit about you. I know you grew up in Pennsylvania. I assume that before you went to high school and you played ball?
Yeah, I grew up in a little town, Archbold, Pennsylvania, which is about 10 miles from Scranton, northeastern Pennsylvania. And football is real important in Pennsylvania. I played for Valley View High School. I was fortunate enough that my junior year we had a jointure and with a couple other schools and had a good experience my last 2 years. You know, we were a championship type football team, and Frank Mazzali was the head coach who kind of became like a mentor to me through the years. And so we won the state championship our senior year. I played with Coach Greg Narvert, Greg is still defense coordinator of Phoebus.
Okay, because I knew you guys had a history, but I didn't know it went all the way back to high school.
All the way back to high school, yeah.
Wow.
We played on the same team. And then from there, you know, I went to Mansfield State College, played football there for 4 years.
What position did you play?
I played offensive line.
Okay.
I was a lot smaller back then. I could play, but I could maybe be better now with the weight I put on. But, you know, played offensive line, played offensive tackle in high school, offensive guard in college.
Okay. Now, were you recruited to go to Mansfield? Was there a lot of kids from your area? Did they go to Mansfield?
It was one of the state schools. You know, look, there's Stroudsburg State, you know, Mansfield, Shippensburg. So, you know, there's a lot of state schools, but that was the one, you know, was a good fit for me educationally, and that's where I ended up.
All right. Now, when you left there, you went to coaching. How did you end up in Virginia rather than staying up in Pennsylvania?
Well, my first job was in a little town outside of Binghamton, Greene, New York. You know, not the greatest football in the world, like I'll be honest with you, up in New York, you know, but it was my start. I coached there for 4 years. I started out as an assistant coach and then eventually became the defensive coordinator. That was a good start for me. You know, I just decided I wanted to go south. I was young, I was single, and I just looked at a map and just started picking out spots down the East Coast. And, you know, didn't want to go all the way to Florida. I wanted to stay close enough where I could get home. And, you know, Newport News, I interviewed up, you know, out in the central part of the state, a little place out there in Farmville, and I didn't want to stay in Farmville. So, you know, came to Newport News, and there was an assistant coach under Matt Boone, and there was an assistant coach job at Warwick, and I ended up, you know, coaching with Matt for a couple of years. And I was a JV coach the first year, defense coordinator next year, and Matt, you know, gave me an opportunity to coach there, and then that's where I started moving. You know, I stayed in Virginia ever since.
Wow, so that's how you got down to Virginia, and I assume from there you went to Phoebus High School. And to talk about Phoebus High School, the year before you took over, their last game, Green Run beat Phoebus 77-0. So here you walking into the bottom of the Peninsula District. I mean, Phoebus was not winning any ball games, not on football field anyway. And you took over, you had to do a lot of changing, not only coaching, but mentally, I guess.
You know, a lot of people, because I was at Southampton High School for 4 years, had a pretty good run there. But I always wanted to come back to the Peninsula because I knew the talent from being at Denby. And so when this position opened up, and you know, even when I was at Denby, Phoebus wasn't great. And then in those 4 years, the program kind of even went down from there. So the positive thing is there was only one way to go.
Yeah,
good
point.
I mean, from that situation. And, you know, the first year was rough, but I knew there was some talent there. But, you know, we had to change the culture. You know, Clayton Washington and Harry Bennett, you know, was the AD then. And they really wanted to they were on board with what we needed to do. You know, we talked about changing the uniforms. We talked about changing a lot of things that needed to be done. So they were, you know, to me, to turn a program around, you have to be on the same page with the administration.
Oh, absolutely. Now, but you also had to get a staff. So, and, you know, here you come in, you got to bring your staff. Was that when Narvin came with you, or was?
No, you know, that's funny because, you know, Vernon Lee was on my first staff. Kurt Newsom you know, was
Right.
my
I remember
assistant
Kurt
coach.
was over there. Yeah.
And, you know, there were some other young guys that, you know, were there for a little while, but, you know, you know, we changed staff a little bit over the years, but, you know, they were the two main guys, you know, that we started the program
Right.
with. Narva didn't come till around 90, I believe.
Okay.
Tom McIntyre, I don't know if you remember Tom,
Right.
he came in as a defensive coordinator when Kurt left for Kickotan. He did a great job, and then that's when, you know, Narva came in. Then we started building the staff that we, you know, Dick Van Dyke, Mike Tyndall coached with me for a while.
Right.
You know, Mike did a good job, but we, you know, Greg Day, they all went. Greg went to school with Tyndall.
Well, they both went to
and
Bethel.
they knew Dickie Van Dyke.
Right.
You know, and then so that's how that kind of all transpired, and then, you know, Ron Johnson came on. You know, Ron wanted to. He was coaching in rec league, and he played at Hampton High. James Holbert, and then, you know, that's how the nucleus of that staff really started to come together.
Well, you got them from the different schools too. Greg was over at Bethel when they won their first state championship when Mike Dunn was the quarterback over there in 1974. He was on that team. So you brought in people that were from winning programs. Dickie Van Dyke from Hampton
Right.
High School and all. So when you were building these, not only did you get your staff together, but then you was talking about, oh, you had to change uniforms, but now you also had to change the thinking of the athletes.
Right.
So now that's not an
And I want to
easy thing
mention
do.
James Holbert came. He was at Woodside for a while. We got him around 2000.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to not mention him.
Right.
He's been with her. But yeah, our kids back then, they had no idea what it took to win, and they just, you know, they had no idea the sacrifices, and they did not understand what a team concept was. So that's why the team me was an easy thing, because if we could just understand team over, you know, an individual,
Right.
I thought we could get him headed in the right direction.
Well, that has always been your
That
mantra.
was it. That was it.
Since day
Yeah,
one.
Didn't have a. Yeah, we'd come up with a team motto, like our last year was unfinished business with Stonebridge, but, you know, team me was always the number one goal. It was
Right.
on all our shirts that, you know, we had to play as a team.
Well, in 24 years you were there, you had 243 wins, 76 losses, and 1 tie. And that's average. That's averaged over 10 wins a season. That's just, to me, is incredible in the Peninsula District, because we're talking one of the toughest districts not only in Virginia, but probably on the Eastern Coast.
And at one time, the district, when you had Kaz at Bethel, you had Kurt at Kickotan, and then later at Heritage, you know, and Coach Smith at Hampton, and then some other, you know, schools that were still pretty good. I mean, it was tough to get through the Peninsula District. I mean, it was a great district.
Well, you end up with 4 state champions. Your first one in 2001. What was it like finally? Okay, you got the golden apple.
Talk about a piano off your back. Because, I mean, you know, we reached a high level in the 90s. You know, in the 80s we had success. I mean, in the 80s we made it to the state semis, lost to Cortland, who eventually won the state championship. Right. In the 90s we lost to Norcom, you know, and we lost to Hampton in the regional, you know, a couple times, you know. So we were close, but and we kept knocking on the door. In 2001, that was a special group, you know, Xavier Debe, DJ Parker, Philip Brown. I mean, and on. There was just a group of guys there that would not be denied.
Right.
And we started that season with the district season with a loss to Warwick, and Marcus Vick was the quarterback that year, not Michael.
Marcus, yeah.
Marcus, who of course ended up being a pretty good quarterback, and Michael was on the sideline. I remember that, and they beat us, and then we won the rest. You know, we just went out after that. The kids just pulled together. That's
incredible. Now, but let me just backtrack just a little. The first time you beat Hampton High School.
It was 1990. That
had to take part of that piano off your back.
I mean, it helped, no question. You know, then the next, you know, trying to beat them on a consistent basis is what we were looking for. You know, to be honest, when you look back at it, you know, we might have made it too special to beat them once, because it took a while before we beat them again. But Yeah, I mean that's the rival, and of course it's to me it's the best rivalry in the state.
Right.
You know, the type of football that is played in the city of Hampton is second to none.
I agree with you there. Now, when you went to Phoebus, what was the biggest concern you had? I know there was a lot of things, but what was the main thing that you had to overcome?
Well, you have to overcome attitudes, and I can remember guys coming up to me the first preseason, and I know they had a problem with numbers getting people out. And I'm thinking, I'm coming in here, and you know they're going to have to come to practice 2 days and stuff like that. And I remember a couple guys going, "Well, Coach, I can make it in the morning, but I got a job in the afternoon, or I can make it in the afternoon, but I got to work in the morning." And I just said, "Well, if you need to just stay at work, because you're going to be here 2 practices, or you're not going to play."
Right.
And of course, it's like we might end up with about 15 guys here, but it was the kids wanted to win. They knew the things that I was setting up for them were good. It just took a little bit for everybody to buy into it, and so we really ended up with decent numbers the first year. In the second year, we tied for the district championship.
Right, which is to me an incredible thing to happen.
Yeah, I mean that's unbelievable when you think back about, like you said, it was the first win was Ferguson. My first year there, we were 1-9, and that was an 18-game losing streak. But that first year, there were a lot of games where we just didn't know how to win.
Right.
We lost some close
So
games.
you basically had to almost teach the kids not only they can win, but they should win.
Yeah, you know, I remember, I'll never forget this. It was Craddock High and we scored a touchdown in a scrimmage. These kids were they were like, we just won the Super Bowl. And I'm like, we just scored a touchdown in a scrimmage. This is the things you're supposed to do. You know, so I had to teach them, you know, these are the things you're supposed to be doing: scoring, making good plays, and you know, it's not a rarity. It's the things you're supposed to do. Right. And again, that just comes down to a whole culture. I remember back then, you know, people looked at me like I was crazy because they were going, "Well, if you go 5-5," I said, "I didn't come here to go 5-5. I said, I want to win a championship." I mean, I've coached for championships, and of course, back then you couldn't even say things like that, but I did. Because and you know the kids, you know, that's what they're going to buy into it. You got to set the goals high.
Right.
For
well, and if you believe it, then eventually they're going to believe it because you're not backing down. You know, and to me, I watched your program when you took over, and I was just amazed every year how you could get the attitude of the guys to believe in what you believed in, and part of that goes to the parents. Don't you agree?
Well, this whole city is football built on. I mean, they're crazy about football, and they love the game, and there's passion for the game. I think I don't think there was ever a lack of passion at Phoebus High School.
Right.
It was just putting that passion in the right direction, and you know, the parents and everybody bought into the program. You know, now we got a great following. You know, the tradition of the program, and I see the guys from the first year a whole lot. I mean, Ronnie Brown, David Presley. The nice thing about going to the Hampton Phoebus games, I get to go to the tailgate before the game and see a lot of the people out there.
Right.
You know, if I'm not out of town coaching, and unfortunately I haven't been the last couple of years, but those guys really appreciate, because they were at the bottom when I came in, and now the program is where it's at. You know, nationally ranked and stuff like that. So those guys really appreciate it.
Well, did you start your weight program right away when you were first there? This was one of the things because did they have a weight program there?
There was a weight room. I mean, you know, I don't know how they used it.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there was some type of weight program. I don't want to say there wasn't, but you know, we hit the weight room a little bit differently than they had in the past. You know, we made it mandatory, and we stayed after them if they weren't in the weight room, and we had to fight that a little bit. Okay. You know. I know Ross Carney and Rick DeVickus had just put new equipment in a room. I mean, you know, that was great that we had a new weight room, and eventually we moved that to the back of the gym, where it is now, because we needed more space because of the amount of people that we had. Well, but we have some of that original equipment. I know there's some of that original equipment still in the weight room. Yeah. Hey, it's iron. You can't
wear it out.
Yeah, that's right.
let's talk a little bit about how did Narvid get with you, Coach Narvid?
Because
here you were, you
well,
played
actually,
high school
Narvid
together.
was down here before I was.
Oh, okay.
He was an assistant coach at Warwick High School. So when I first came down here, I called Greg, and when I was interviewing, I stayed with him, and so I ended up taking the Denby job. He was at Warwick. Then he ended up coming up to Denby, and eventually at Ferguson.
Okay.
So we knew each other, of course, from high school and college. We went to the same college, so that's how we kind of we had that relationship. And then came down here and coached with him a little bit. And then he went to Ferguson, and then he went back to Denby, and then we just said, let's get together. And when my defensive coordinator left, Tom McIntyre, he came down, and now the rest was history. He's just been with me the whole time.
Talk a little bit about how you developed the 4-4 in your offense. Was this from high school and college, or did you just a combination of how did you pick it up and say, this is what we're going to run?
Well, growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania, the run was the way. I mean, I remember winning the state championship game, the Eastern Conference championship game. We didn't throw the ball once, and it was against a really good football team. But so that was kind of ingrained in me. Of course, as I got older, and I realized you have to throw the ball some. Balance is always good, and it got better. But I always felt that you had to run to the football to win and play great defense to win. The type of defense kind of evolved over the years. We were a 50 front, and then we evolved to the 8-man front. We went to tech a lot. Those guys were really good to us. Jim Kavanaugh was a very good friend of mine, and we got a lot of stuff and Coach Beamer always welcomed us up there. We'd sit with Bud Foster, and they'd spend as much time as we needed. So that's where we kind of evolved into the 8-man front over the years. Your
team, your school always seems to come up with tailbacks that can run the football. And I mean, you've got some good ones that I'm just thinking of McWright and Lewis off the top of my head. And there was many more to know. And Womack, I mean, you really, how did you end up with them? Or were they running backs before you got a hold of them?
Well, obviously, the one that I really remember started out with was David Brown.
Right.
David Brown, he came in '86, which was his first year. He transferred from Fort Lee or someplace, Fort Meade in Maryland, I forget where. So I needed a guard. He said he had played tailback, and he was a good-sized kid, like 200 pounds. I said, I already got him. Mike Artis was my tailback, and I had some other guys. I said, you got to play guard for me this year. He says, all right, I will. That was the kind of kid he was. So he played guard. So his senior year, he said, Coach, I played guard, and I did it for the team. Can I have a shot at tailback? And I was looking for a tailback. So I said, I'll give you a shot. Well, he turned to be an all-state tailback. Went to the University of Virginia, and then everybody, said, "Well, boy, what a great move." I was thinking, I don't know, maybe it wasn't such a good move. I had it on my guard the year before, but that kind of got the trend going. And then we just had, and then Womack. He was a freshman when he started playing.
Right.
Maurice Turner, and you mentioned some guys, T.J. Carrington. We just always found a kid. There's always a hard-nosed kid that's going to run the ball up in there. We felt we could find one. We were going to find a tailback because those kids, and as you get a tradition for something like that, those kids want to carry on a tradition.
Right.
Tyree Lee, right now, he talked about the tradition of tailbacks.
Right.
And so I think you're going to find one guy that wants to carry that on, and
right.
it's just good to see, that we could always find one. So I don't know if we're just fortunate, but we always found one.
Well, that's always great, but you also end up with some great linemen, and you have to have a good offensive lineman to open up the holes or the creases or whatever for your backs. You being an offensive lineman, did you have a lot of input into that?
Well, Greg Narvid, who also defense coordinator, did the offensive line. I used to do the offensive line. I mean, throughout the years, I probably you have to do a little bit of everything.
Right.
In high school, it's not like you sit back and you don't get to coach a position. I mean, I evolved to the point where I ended up with the quarterbacks and calling the plays. I felt that was the best position to coach if you're calling the plays. But I did offensive line, it just goes back to where I think you have to run the ball and you got to have hard-nosed guys. And I don't think you have to be. Obviously, I played offensive line. You didn't have to be overly talented.
Right.
But you just had have a passion to play and play hard. And we've had a lot of different guys from 190 pounds to 290 pounds play the offensive line. But they were just kids who understood their role.
A lot of people were really sad when you left and went to CNU.
Yeah, it was tough.
You just got done winning the state championship.
I felt that was probably the best time to leave. It's always good to leave on top.
Right.
But it was hard.
And now at CNU, you
had new challenges.
Right. You got any hope beyond, ahead somewhere?
Just take it one day, 1 year at a time. If something, if opportunity knocks. I mean, you always look at opportunities. But I'm happy where I am right now. It's close to home, and I get to stay in this area, and this area is home for me now.
Well, and I'm glad to be able to go to the ball games and see you on the sideline. Although you're not
I
coaching.
enjoy that. I enjoy going to the games. I love high school football. I miss it. I don't regret leaving because it was something I felt at the time I felt I needed a change. But I love high school football, and that's where we get our players. You got to recruit high school players, so I love watching it.
All right. One last thing, Bill, before we close it out. What would you say to the athletes that were thinking about going to a small school? What would you tell them about CNU?
I think I would tell them that playing Division III football is still a great opportunity to continue to play. I know everybody has grandeur ideas of going Division I, but not everybody got to do that. I didn't get to do that. I had to play it was Division II, but it was not scholarship. And I think a lot of people would be surprised how good the football is. It's great football. You're not just going to come in and play, sometimes, but it's excellent football. There's excellent players. CNU, Matt Kelser's been the only head coach they've ever had. So there's consistency. Out of those 10 years, they've won 7 conference championships, went on to, be in the playoffs like we did this past year. Great education. You're going to get a good education. You're close enough where your family can come see you every week you play, or even for the away games they can see you play. So it's a great opportunity, and I think it's got a great tradition, and the facilities are as good as anybody's on the East Coast.
Well, thanks for coming, Bill.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, Bob.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in to LSC. This is Sports Time. I want to thank my special guest, Bill D., for taking time to come in and talk to us today and tell us a little bit about his history and his time over at Phoebus High School. Bob Hintz, until next time.